everyone. This is Rita Matuzic, and you are listening to the Real Talk, Real Results podcast, the show that doesn't sugarcoat B2B marketers' everyday challenges and discusses actionable, realistic solutions. Today, we're discussing the relationship between sales and marketing and how the two teams can build deeper trust. Joining me is Jonathan Hallatt, Director of International Channels at Census. Jonathan, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background?
Hi, Rita. Yeah, great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me on. So I've been involved in sales, channels, sales leadership roles for, I guess, 25 years or so. And for the first 10 years of my career, I was working for smaller startup channel partners and working in the actual channel. And those smaller partners got acquired, and we ended up in quite a large systems integrator. And then for the second 15 years of my career, I've been working for the US-based tech vendor community, and been predominantly working in those tech vendors in sales leadership roles, both here in the UK and Europe, but also I had almost 4 years working and living in the United States, for a number of years working the channel there. So now I work for Census, which is the world's best internet scanning technology, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this little team as we build and grow that business.
Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your background. That was wonderful. Today, like I mentioned, we are going to be talking about the relationship between sales and marketing, which is great. Since you're on the sales side, I'm on the marketing side. So what should have changed from your perspective in this relationship, but hasn't yet changed?
What should have changed is clearly the tightness of the relationship between sales and marketing should have become a lot closer. And in some cases, it has. I've been lucky enough to work with some incredibly talented marketing people who've been brilliant, really working together with sales. But I don't think that's common everywhere. And I think that comes down to the two disciplines are actually very, very different in terms of the skill sets and capabilities that they have. So marketing is such a broad umbrella term for so many different types of skills, digital, social influencers, corporate, internal, investor relations, creative stuff, lead gen, SDRs. Then you've got the operations and measurement, and so it just goes on and on. And it's very difficult, I think, for salespeople to see that actually that person over there is from marketing, whereas maybe they only do two or three of those functions, and so it's hard. And sorry, the other thing about marketing is there tend to be people that look forward for new technologies. They look for new techniques, exciting new technologies to try and give them the edge or give them some better data or information. Sales, on the other hand, I mean, good salespeople, really their skill set is understanding people, understanding what influences people, how to influence people, how organizations are structured, how organizations work, how decisions are made, who influences who, and so on. Those skills are skills which haven't really changed over the years, but are still really important to get things done, get deals done. So it's kind of, I think that's the sort of where we are and where the differences are with the two things. So with the two types of discipline.
That's really fascinating that you framed it that way, that marketers, and they're very forward thinking. Like, how do we evolve what we've been doing and make it better than what we did before? How do we take new technologies and make our lives easier, make our programs better, generate more leads, generate more revenue for the company? As a marketer, we think others are this way too, but it's very interesting hearing your side of it, your perspective from the sales side of the house, that things that have worked, you will continue to use because they work. Like, there isn't as much of that innovation to process or technique that happens on the marketing side because perhaps it's not as relevant for your side of the house. So I think that's very important for us to understand about each other, since we work so closely together and we're kind of two sides of a coin, especially for those marketers of us who are on the revenue generation side, or support the revenue generation. It's good to understand how you think and how we obviously think a little bit differently, which actually leads me to my next question, which is around communication. A lot of teams, even inside of marketing, right? Like you just said it, there's so many different types of marketers. Like marketing is very much an umbrella term, and every organization has different types of marketers depending on the size of the organization. And there will be communication challenges cross-functionally, internally in the team. It's human nature. What do you think marketers can do better to communicate with their sales counterparts?
The best marketing people I've had the privilege of working with have been people who've taken the time to really listen to customers, really listen to you know what influences them, why they bought the product, how did they first hear about it, and so on. They've done that through maybe attending service reviews. Quite often we have customer success teams, which is brilliant, but marketing doesn't kind of do too much with customer success sometimes. They don't they have their own deck of slides which maybe not on brand, and they're not talking about some of the events that are coming up. They're not aligned too well with marketing. So spend time with on those customer review calls or those service review calls. I've had marketing people that have attended support calls as well, just to listen to customers maybe who are experiencing some problems, really understand the value of what the product that we sell, the solution we sell, gives to solutions. And then also things like user groups are quite good as well. They can sometimes be, they're helpful, but maybe people sometimes aren't as open as they might be when they've got a problem on a support call. So it's really trying to understand customers, because then when you have the conversation with sales, what you say then is so much more fact-based and, comes from the voice of the customer.
The customer perspective for a marketing team can be very meaningful in how we run programs. But something that you said kind of leads me to a new question that I want to get your perspective on is, and this is something many of us are facing on the marketing team, is how do we attend those calls when perhaps we're not in a customer marketing role? So, let me elaborate a little bit. There are some teams where we have dedicated marketers who are customer marketing, customer facing. Other teams are maybe resource constrained, or they're still growing and they're doing a lot, they're wearing a lot of hats. How do we find people, or find a bridge, or identify who are the right folks in the marketing organization to attend those calls? And I ask this because I don't think everybody in marketing should be in those calls. So, like, who from your perspective are the right marketers for those types of calls?
When you're thinking about demand generation, I think those are those functions there would find that most useful.
Yeah.
Really, demand generation is such a hard task, and so much of that planning and thinking about the personas that we come up with. And
Yeah.
the persona is a great way of getting marketing to think about the customer in a bit more detail. But of course, no one really fits into the persona in the real world. They're all individual people. They're all a bit crazy. They've all got different things going on in their lives and so on. So it's kind of thinking about those types of job roles and the personas. But it's those people, I think, in marketing, I think would really benefit from being and having the salespeople involved at the early stage during those planning discussions.
Yes, I agree. I would say definitely the demand team, even the digital marketing team, because they're kind of starting to fit into demand in many organizations. Even product marketers, I think, can help sometimes bridge those gaps for the other folks on the marketing organization of, what are things that matter to our customers from the product side, from, how we position our messaging, like what do our customers really care about, and how do we bring that into the programs that we run. I definitely agree. I think that's really important. And then I want to ask you, we were talking about how can marketers, be better, communicate better. What do you think the sales folks can do to better communicate with their marketing peers?
Certainly need to accept and agree that we're all really trying to work towards the same goals, which are, we need to create well-qualified pipeline and book deals. I mean, that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
So I think there's they need to come to that point with those marketing teams and just accept that that's the case. I think it's also just when they see the tools and techniques and they see what marketing can do, I think there's the respect starts to build and so on. So they need to be a little bit willing to engage and understand but understand that their input, sales input can be so important in terms of the way the messaging is crafted and so on.
Especially as a lot of marketers, well, not a lot of marketers, but a lot of marketing teams are moving into running ABM programs, and ABM programs you can't run without sales, right? We need to know who are the customers, the accounts that we want to target, which customer accounts do we want to try to upsell or cross sell into, which ones, are kind of those key accounts that we maybe don't want to touch. And I think that's where we see a lot of improvement in the relationship between sales and marketing, and folks on both sides who I think understand each other a little bit better. But 1,000%, I think we both have to show up, right? And we have to understand that we're different, and we're coming with the same goals, but we just approach them into very different mindsets that can work well together, right? As long as we communicate. What advice do you have that can help sales trust marketing more? Follow up to that is, what do you think marketers can do to help sales trust us more with data that we're bringing, programs that we're running? What's missing there?
I think going back to what I said just a moment ago, an example would be the tool which is Sixth Sense, for example. And Sixth Sense, I'm sure many of your listeners will know that tool. I think when I first saw that as a sales leader, and somebody was able to say, right, here's where the person first interacted, and here are all the touch points, and these are the events and the things that we put out as a marketing team, which caused them to, and this is what's got them to your door. I think that was really incisive, but the way they presented it was very relevant to the sales and sales team. And I think that's something which quite often, you'll have a sales meeting and marketing will come in and do a presentation, then they'll get very excited about all these wonderful events they're doing, and actually that's not too relevant. When you can show how the journey of the customer from initial inquiry to sort of qualified lead, I think that really helps build that trust between sales and marketing. It helps the salespeople see the value of all of those events, which going back to what we said earlier, some of those things it's hard to attribute when you put that money in to specific opportunities. It might be branding, might be something a bit wider, and so it's hard for marketing to say, well, that definitely caused that lead or that opportunity. But then, if you see something like Sixth Sense, you can start to see how those events and those activities are influencing and moving the opportunity forward.
Yes, and you were just talking about it. It's very rarely one activity that creates an opportunity. It is one activity that brings in a lead, a net new lead, or a lead that we're re-engaging, right? Maybe a downloaded piece of content on the website. Maybe they engaged with an ad. That's where that lead is first created, but very rarely do they move on and then, go straight to a salesperson or an SDR and then opportunities created. There's so many touch points that happen from both the marketing side and the sales side before we get to any qualified stages. And I love hearing that, you're coming from a place where having tools like Sixth Sense and seeing that journey has been really helpful to you. Have you experienced that sometimes salespeople, maybe in your organization or past organizations, where they maybe don't trust that data?
Oh, I think good salespeople will always recognize and see the power of that stuff. I think there will be people that are a little bit dismissive and so on because it's new and I think the other thing to say is that the fundamental change since I started in sales is the time that salespeople are engaged with customers is getting less and less because of the amount of time that marketing is working on building demand, building brand awareness, getting people to trust the brand, etc., etc. All those things which often salespeople would have done, had lots of time to build relationships and so on. That's really been squeezed. So that when a lead comes in, salespeople, and I used to say this, it's got to be rapid response. You've got to jump on it because the customer's in the moment and they've seen something, they'd like something, and you've got to figure out a technique to instill trust and confidence quickly but also to understand the pain that the customer has identified
Yeah.
and why they've connected that pain with what you're selling, and do all that really fast. Whereas in the past, you may have had sort of weeks and days to do that. Now you've really got hours and some short calls. So you've got to be very thoughtful. You've got to be very quick. You've got to be able to grab the resources you need, whether that's people, whatever, collateral, and you've got to be able to act quickly and positively. And I think that's the big difference that's happening. And it may turn out that the opportunities then move forward and sales carry on with that. But it may also mean that there's the opportunity gets passed back to marketing for more nurture for the next stage, depending on the load that the sales team are under.
Yes, and I want to dig into what you just said more around how previously, years ago, it was really heavily focused on salespeople building relationships, like the time that it takes to build relationships. And now that we live in a more digital world, that marketing has evolved, and there's so much happening, like you said, before a lead, a customer gets in front of sales, that a lot of that relationship happens with the brand before any person gets involved. So the reality is these relationships are kind of, and the brand building and the relationship building is happening before sales steps in. And you started talking about this a little bit already, but how has this impacted the sales process and even the way that you train sales teams?
Certainly, that focusing in on those skills, those discovery skills, and being able to think about what is it that's going to influence that customer. And I mentioned earlier trust and confidence
Right.
in not just in the brand, which in a sense has already been established to a certain extent by marketing, but also trust in that you are also reflecting the values of that brand, and you're reflecting that in terms of the way you operate, the way you go about business, and also maybe the way your other customers are referencing you or whatever it happens to be. So making calls, Zoom calls, because often it's a remote call to begin with,
Yes.
making them really impactful, thinking about how you run those calls for maximum impact, such that you don't go over time, you make sure you've got plenty of time for questions, etc., or you've got clear objectives that you've outlined and that you use the resources intelligently. So all of those things, you're not changing what salespeople do, but you're trying to get them to be much more impactful and fast. You don't really get the opportunity to screw these things up. You need to be really on your game. And so yeah, that's what's that. I think that's the biggest change I've seen with the teams, and also the people that support the salespeople. So systems engineers, for example, have a crucial, and continue to have a crucial role in influencing that customer. But their role also, they need to also be cognitive of, right, very specific about what it is that the customer is trying to solve, not these are all the things that we can do to help you. And here's a list of features and functions. Really home in on understanding that, fixing that problem, and then moving on as necessary. So it's just really thinking and being thoughtful around those areas.
It's interesting the way you described that, because as you were speaking, what I was hearing is things have become more personalized and more customized, which is also what we're experiencing on the marketing side, where all the programs that we're running, they're not always, personal and customized, but that's what we're moving towards, is speaking to specific pain points of customer accounts, prospect accounts, even individual people, depending on the type of programs that we're running. And it is curious and wonderful to hear that that's also happening on the sales side, because that is somewhere where we clearly kind of are functioning in the same way. And it's also a really big change, right? Because it's harder sometimes to build a relationship when you're focused on something so specific, because like you said, you have to be on your game, you have to be ready to go. I'm wondering, did anything change in the selling process after COVID happened? And you were talking about a lot of things, moved to Zoom, a lot of meetings are remote, relationships are building remotely. Like, what have you seen in addition to what we already talked about that's kind of changed the way sellers go about creating those relationships and closing business?
the big change is that customers themselves are also working remotely and are less willing to meet face to face. But you cannot win business remotely. I mean, some people do, of course, but you can't. It's almost impossible to understand an organization, especially new business, trying to understand an organization, how it works, and who's who, where's the power, where's the pain, who's responsible for pain, how much is the pain costing. You can't. It's very hard to do that from a remote perspective. So I think the fact that customers are unwilling to come together, maybe because they are also too they're they don't have a central office anymore. They're all dispersed all around the world in some cases. So that does present a problem. And I think, yeah, again, with my teams, we've just been trying to be really creative about how we get in a room with a customer, and whether that's using the example I used earlier on, service reviews with a customer. Customers are more likely to come together for something that's going to add value to their day. Really thinking about that, whereas perhaps in the past before COVID, people were willing to meet for a coffee for half an hour and just talk through those things are starting to come back, but it's not as easy as it perhaps it used to be. So it's really thinking about how getting people together and then really maximizing the value out of that time with them. So I think that's the main difference.
Thank you for mentioning the service reviews piece again, because I wanted to ask you a question about sales also has a review process that they do around win reviews, opportunity reviews after deals are closed, which is an internal process. You don't do that with the customers. Marketing attends these types of discussions, or not often. And if you were able to get marketers to join, probably from the demand gen side, probably more senior level decision makers, what would you want us to bring to the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's an essential part of any sales team to certainly review wins, no question about it, and also to potentially look at losses as well. I mean, that's sometimes more difficult to get people to talk about losses because no one wants to talk about that. They all want to move on and get away from the bad stuff. But it is really important that marketing are involved in those meetings for the reasons we've discussed already. Okay, so how did the customer get to us in the first place? What were the things that they were interested in? Did we successfully translate that interest into something that was relevant to them? Or was there maybe or were we rapid in our response? Did we get back to them quickly enough? Is that where they were on fire for it for a bit and then they may have cooled off a bit, whatever. The other areas I think I talk about this with, is load sharing with marketing, is that, yeah, maybe the sales team were dragged over here to deal with a rapid response requirement from another customer. They were deep involved in that at the same time that the other customer came along and said, "Hey, I'm interested too." And as we know, opportunities never come along in organized succession. They all sometimes all come at the same time. So is there an opportunity here for sales and marketing to load share and say, actually, we can't get to that right now. Can you continue to nurture? Can the SDR team take care of that? Do some more work around that, maybe drag in resource. I think we want to get away from this. Hey, marketing, we've created these opportunities. There you go. Over to you guys, and if you don't deal them, then well, we've done our job. And I want to bring this word into this podcast, which is co-selling. We need to really think about how do we co-sell as a team, and that might be sometimes where we have to, in those pinch points, we have to look at, did we miss an opportunity? Did we miss an opportunity to engage more positively with that customer?
I like that term, co-selling, because I definitely don't think most marketers think of themselves as sellers, even though some of us who are on demand gen, field marketing, digital demand, we associate ourselves a lot more with opportunities than some of the other marketing teams do, because we have OKRs, KPIs around generating a certain amount of opportunities for the sales organization. But I do think there is definitely a little bit of, okay, we did it, it's yours, take it from here. How do you think marketers could co-sell? Like what would that look like? And do you see that involving like certain tools or data even? Like what would be an action that our listeners and even we could take from this discussion in terms of how we can go back to our teams and say, hey, let's talk about what it would mean if marketing and sales did co-selling.
Attribution is a word as well, isn't it? In the companies I work for, often they'll have, the lead source will be attributed to either partner generated, marketing generated, or sales generated. So, are we, is that the right way? Is that giving us the right behavior by already right at the start separating those three teams and saying, well, they're the best one because they've created the most, and these are the worst. We should think about that and how we perhaps do that a bit better. I understand the rationale. You need to see whether, different teams and how they're producing and so on. But is that really driving the right behavior? I'm not sure that it is. And I think that people cleverer than me probably need to think about how we tackle that. I think for marketing people, it's really being brave. Just get with the sales teams. Be curious about the sales process. Trying to understand that. Listen to the SEs. Listen to the subject matter experts within the organization. Understand and listen to them. We use a tool called Gong.io, which some of you, again, listeners will be familiar with. Really great way of listening back to customer meetings, customer calls, understanding, okay, so could we have done if that person had that piece of collateral at that point, or that reference study or something like that, could that conversation have gone better at that point? And really thinking about that, and then perhaps coming back to salespeople and saying, we've listened to that call again, and here's some suggestions about some of the things you may not have realized we had, or here's some events we're doing, which if you'd known about them, you could have invited somebody to, or whatever. So I think it's really comes back to getting involved with sales, be curious. One of the best campaigns I ever did was when we were struggling with this product, which was a great product, but just wasn't selling. We were really, so I got everybody together, marketing. I got an agency in to do with digital expertise. I got various people, the product marketing, product teams, etc. Got everybody together, blank sheet of paper, and we said, right, how do we do this? How do we crack this? What's the message that we need to get eyes on this product and get it going? And it was when the whole team came together right at the start and really thought about it and worked all the way through together, that we created this brilliant campaign. It was great. We went from being the worst performing region to the best performing region, and it was tremendous. But it taught me so much. I learned so much about how that interaction should work, and I'd really recommend people to think about that.
I have one final question today, and it's something we've really been discussing throughout this entire discussion and kind of in the underlying message of our conversation, which is really, and CEOs will say this often, is everyone at these companies, at our organizations, is here to support sales. But I know personally, and I'm sure you'll agree, that salespeople oftentimes don't feel that way, since most of the time, if something goes wrong, they're going to get the brunt of the blame, especially when revenue goals aren't met. So what is the advice you have for marketers and other teams to, be more sales friendly and also understand that they're in a support role to the sales team?
It goes back to what we said earlier. Co-selling is the key. Working together all the way through the process, not just at the beginning, the demand gen, and then flipping the leads over. And that comes from both respect from both sides. I think that means that salespeople also need to recognise that marketing is a big influencer in our success. And could sales also help marketing with the messaging, maybe tune it slightly better so that it's more impactful, particularly when you're selling internationally as well. Some of the wording may work in the United States, but may not work so well in the UK or Germany or whatever. We all know that localization is really key, but that's a critical thing, because that first eyes on that messaging or whatever is often the start of the engagement with that brand. So yeah, I'd say co-selling is absolutely key, and the secret to, whether it's the secret, one of the ways that we could do better. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I appreciate all your insight. I know our audience does too, and it has been wonderful to have you on our podcast today.
It's been great, Rita. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me.